Hey everyone, it's me, Aberguine! We're doing a crossover between Culturally after my own review series, Furries in the Media. Today I'll be examining the phenomenon of furry exploitation or fursploitation, using furries or anthropomorphic animals as an easy target for marketing. This can be for ridicule or as positive inclusion to tap the furry market. Back on my channel, Rusty's doing a Furries in the Media review on 3 fursploitative examples, Entourage, iZombie, and The Drew Carey Show, so be sure to check that out after this video. What exactly is fursploitation? The word fursploitation is a portmanteau of furry and exploitation, in reference to exploitative media. Fursploitation can come in all forms, from relentlessly prodding interviews of members of the furry fandom to awkward stereotypes acted out in rental costumes to including anthropomorphic characters in advertising. Can furries be guilty of this too? Is culturally effed guilty of this as well? Well, in any case, fursploitation is culturally effed. In order to better understand fursploitation, we first need to take a look at exploitative media. Exploitation films often exploit current trends, niche genres or interest, or otherwise taboo content, and exploitative films have been around since the start of cinema, but gained popularity in the 1960s and 70s when censorship laws were relaxed in the US and UK. Some of the most popular films from the genre have since become cult classics, like Night of the Living Dead. There are a plethora of exploitation film subgenres such as sexploitation, blaxploitation, grindhouse films, Nazi exploitation, the list goes on ad infinitum. Exploitative media is very often considered harmful because it typically relies on perpetuating negative stereotypes, but some see it as a means of empowerment because it often includes people who would otherwise have little to no screen time in other mainstream productions. But unsurprisingly, the harmfulness of perpetuated stereotypes often overshadows inclusion. Take CSI Las Vegas' episode Fur and Loathing. The episode was heavily focused on furries, but the story arc relied on creating and perpetuating stereotypes that ultimately did more damage than good to the image of the furry community. Even though that episode first aired more than 10 years ago, it's often been the first exposure that a lot of people had to the furry fandom, myself included, and many people today still base their opinion on furries on the representation shown in that episode. That episode in particular reached over 27 million people when it first aired, and that's a lot of people who were largely unaware of furries to begin with, but that's a lot of people who are now misinformed about furries. But when is it exploiting furries and when is it just fur-friendly, fur-inclusive? Not every inclusion of furries comes with the catch of relying on stereotypes. Take for instance the show Hardcore Pawn. In one episode, there were a group of actual fursuiters who came in to do business, and it worked out about like any other transaction, except the fursuiters decided not to speak, so it made haggling over the price a bit of a challenge. The show may have been pandering to its audience, but it did include real fursuiters acting as they normally would. Even a marketing team for Disney's Zootopia included furries in a viral marketing campaign to promote the film. There was an email that circulated amongst a furry meetup group requesting furries to take pictures of each other in their fursuits and to use a specific hashtag on Instagram and Twitter to help promote the film. There have been loads of speculation and debate within the furry fandom as to whether or not Disney made Zootopia for furries, but I think it's pretty clear that Disney definitely meant to include furries as a target audience for the film. Here's how to spot blatant fursploitation. Rental fursuits. Furries are often made to be the butt end of jokes, poor or invented behaviors, lingo, or customs. What is the production company's motive for including animal costumes, fursuits, or cartoon animals? Do they take the time to address the non-sexual elements of the fandom? Have they done their research? One common example of fursploitation that I often come across on my channel is when a program will interview a member of the furry community and then edit the footage to fit a predetermined narrative, regardless of the original context of the interview. This seems to be done for the sake of maintaining viewership ratings by pandering to their audience's expectations rather than challenging them. This particular type of fursploitation has sparked the furry fandom to be rightly wary of casting calls, and it has also led many furry conventions to adopt stricter media policies in order to prevent blatant misrepresentation of their attendees. Another example of furry exploitation is introducing a fictional furry character to a show as a stand-in for a fetish, usually opening the door to creating some scenes with awkward sexual tension. So it goes something like this. Typically, the show would introduce a furry character into the plotline for a touch of absurdity and to create some intensely awkward moments. Usually, the humor is based on how the recurring characters of the show react to this visiting furry character, and it's not uncommon for the furry character to wear an obviously rented mascot costume at some point in the show. Bonus points if the show confuses being a furry with being a Therian or a plushophile. In fact, all 3 of the shows that Rusty is reviewing on my channel feature this specific type of furry exploitation. Bad examples are easy to find, especially one-off punchlines or visual humor like American Dad, 30 Rock, but when a whole story arc hinges on the characters being furry, like CSI, ER, Entourage, or The Drew Carey Show, we get into territory that really builds a character for the audience to react to. This is where I usually get nitpicky in my review series. If a show is going to include a character who is supposed to be a member of the furry fandom, that character alone becomes the ambassador for all furries, and that holds significant weight on how it influences the audience's impression of the entire furry fandom. Not all portrayals of furries have to be bad to constitute being exploitation. Remember this viral music video? What does the fox say? Given the premise of the song and the fact that Ylvis confirmed that the fox does indeed say yiff, it does make sense that there are people in furry costumes in the music video. Or even take Megan Lane's song, Someday We Will Leave This Town. The song was written with the LGBT community in mind, but fursuiters were used as a visual stand-in order to better translate to video, and the choice to use fursuiters was heavily influenced by Megan's cursory knowledge of the furry fandom. Or even the feature-length film Bitter Lake. The film was created by furries with an all-furry cast, and even the music was composed by furries, and it was first shown to furries at Eurofriends 2011. Could this count as the first true Fursploitation film? Because it doesn't get much more furry than that. Can we just make Fursploitation films a thing? Because I would totally watch that. Of course, furries aren't always popular in media all the time, but there are some notable trends that media outlets have definitely caught on to. Take, for instance, right after the attack that took place at Midwest Fur Fest 2014. Not only were news stations covering the story because it was of public interest, but a number of reports and articles sprang up practically overnight offering support in favor of the furry community, with a lot of them going out of their way to raise positive public awareness of the furry fandom by helping to dismiss some of the misconceptions about furries. Another example from earlier in 2016, there was a group of refugees from Syria that were brought into Vancouver and stayed in a hotel that was hosting a furry convention. Much to everyone's surprise, the refugees' reactions to the furries was overwhelmingly positive. This led to even more news coverage of that event, but also another wave of furry positive attention. So today we talked about furry exploitation or fursploitation. We saw both good examples of furry inclusion and bad examples of furry exploitation, and we saw some of the results from the media's representation of furries. But what do you guys think? When does it count as just harmless furry inclusion, and when does it cross the line into being exploitative? Be sure to subscribe to Rusty's channel here and leave him your comments. Want to know how Entourage, iZombie, and The Drew Carey Show handle presenting furries? Go check out Rusty's Furries in the Media review, and subscribe to my channel while you're there. I've been your guest host Aberguine, and that's all for today's episode of Culturally.fd. Have fun, stay awesome. Bye-bye!
Underbite, could you give me a hand? Ah, my lucky human hand. It came off of one of these fluffy people. Culturally.fd this week was supported by people on Patreon who gave us money for doing internet stuff. If you like what we do, share, like, subscribe, and I won't take your hand.